Howdy, this is my awareness presentation for ISTM 455 by me, Alec Taylor. And for the first issue that I want to go over is going to be phishing. Now, phishing is not just is a pretty major issue in pretty much every company today. Essentially, phishing is pretty much when attackers send scam emails, text messages, or some sort of message that contains a link to a malicious website or links. And essentially, the main purpose of this is essentially get you to click on that link in order to essentially steal whoever the employee's information, try to take over that employee's computer, download viruses, etc. And essentially, clicking on the link is obviously really, really bad. On the right here, you can see an example of what a phishing email may look like. Now, there's a few signs you can tell that this is a phishing email. First thing is going to be the fact that the link looks suspicious. It doesn't look like an official Bank of America website link. You can also tell that on the second line before your account holder, you see that device is spelt wrong, and essentially that's a typo. That's a clear sign that something's wrong because, the actual Bank of America usually would not have any typos. But you got to also understand that a lot of phishing emails have, especially today with newer technologies, have gotten good enough to not really have any typos and to look even more like a real email from an actual company. And moving on, there are many variations of phishing, but the two I kind of wanted to focus on is spear phishing, which is essentially a more of a targeted version that kind of focuses on a certain target by using personalized messaging. Now, this may be through the digging up of information about a user's name, where they live, maybe even some relatives. And then there's also social engineering, which is where essentially they pretend to be a trusted entity. On the example here, you can see they pretended to be Bank of America. Honestly, not a very good job because they didn't even use the logo. But some attackers have gotten good enough to essentially almost look like the real deal. And you may be wondering, how do we stop this from being you after you get affected by a phishing attack and lead to your company getting exposed? And my recommendation for this is to actually use anti-spoofing controls. And this would be through a domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance system, or DMARC. Essentially, what this does is it uses a sender policy framework and a domain keys identified mail to check the email if it's trusted. Essentially, what it does is it first runs the sender policy framework, which essentially checks if the IP address from the email is trusted. And then it runs the domain keys identified mail, which essentially cryptographically signs emails to also see if they're trusted. So if one of these fails, then we know that either it's from an untrusted source, and you can set it to essentially filter it out, or you can keep it to come in, but usually the safest option is filter it out. And in fact, Texas A&M has a similar system to this, and whenever you get emails from Texas A&M that are not directly from A&M, you may see this message from an external sender, and that's part of this DMARC system. And this system would greatly help because, number one, you can have also training for employees to check phishing, but the best way is to try to stop the emails before they get to the employees, because that reduces the risk the most. Now, moving on to the second issue or topic is going to be a badly configured access control. Now, this is a pretty major issue because essentially employees have access to certain systems. And essentially, if it's not configured correctly, an employee has way more access than they should, and that employee somehow either goes rogue or even gets attacked and their system gets taken over, that could lead to irreparable damage. And essentially, with an access control, you need to manage who is authorized to access corporate data well, or it can lead to many issues. And the best recommendation for this is going to be through a principle of least privilege, which is pretty much a concept of making sure a user should only have access to specific data, resources, and applications needed. And essentially, it's having the lowest level of access needed to do their applications. And what this does is, it first makes sure that a user cannot have more access than they should. That alone greatly reduces the risk of, if someone takes over the system, then they won't have as much control and ability to lead to even more damage. And also make sure if an employee goes rogue that they can't do the same thing as well. And this is one of my biggest recommendations for this. And I just want to say thank you for listening to my presentation over awareness, and here are my sources.